our theme tonight is the parent as the child's champion. And I've asked Alison to do a presentation, which will be followed by a discussion with our panel.
Okay, welcome. A few familiar faces and a few people I've never met before. So it'd be nice to get to know you all a little bit. If I'd like to make this very slightly interactive, so all of my slides are pose questions, so feel free to type in anything that you want to as you go along, and I'll keep an eye on the chat at the same time. And that'll be fine. I tend not to do presentations where I'm just talking at people. I like to interact a little bit, and it's been very strange doing these presentations online because I don't feel like you're here with me, if you know what I mean. It's a different experience. So let's see how we go with this format anyway. So I'm going to start screen sharing because I've got my presentation up here. Can everybody see that? I'm just trying to see if I can get the chat up again. Yeah. That's lovely. Thank you. Thanks for saying that, Randall. I'll just get the chat back up again, which managed to disappear, of course, when least convenient. Okay, so Juliet's asked me to talk about the parent as the child's champion, and this is a sort of continuation of the discussion we've been having. Randall presented on Monday night. Last night, Harriet presented, and this is a continuation of that theme. So Randall was presenting about how the state is interfering really, and how far back that state interference goes, how high up it goes, and that it's a global movement, is this interference with the parenting of children, etc., and parenting and schooling, obviously, and education of children. And then Harriet continued the theme with whose children are they anyway, which was lovely. And I watched her presentation this afternoon with great interest, and to make sure that I didn't, we didn't cover the same things quite, and we meshed in carefully. So this idea of the parent as the child as the child's champion. What I'll do first of all is this is a dictionary definition of champion. A champion is someone who enthusiastically and vigorously supports or defends a person or a cause. And Juliet very kindly sent me this quote, which is from Rita Pearson. Rita Pearson is an educator. I believe she's a primary or an elementary school teacher in America, but she's done a TED talk. Is that right, Juliet?
Yes, that's right. And it is interesting to me that she makes the statement and we take it a little differently than what she does.
Well, yes, and I have a little bit of an issue with the last phrase in the statement. Now I'll come to that in a second. So every child deserves a champion, an adult who will never give up on them, who understands the power of connection and insists that they become the best that they can possibly be. Well, I mean, apart from anything else, as Juliet points out quite rightly, that actually sounds like a parent to me. That sounds like a parent. Doesn't sound like a teacher. It sounds like a parent to me. It could be a teacher if that child doesn't have a parent that is their champion, and then they would have to seek a champion elsewhere. But I wouldn't want my place in my daughter's life to be usurped by some random adult at school.
Indeed.
And neither this phrase, the best that they can possibly be, sounds an awful lot like reaching their potential, meeting their potential. And who knows about their children's potential better than a parent? And in fact, I don't know whether you as parents have found this, but I have found that the things I thought my children would do have turned out to be completely different from what they've ended up doing. And they've turned out to be talented in ways I'd never imagined. When my daughter was 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 years old, I didn't think that she was going to be as academic as my son. Turns out she's 10 times more academic than my son, but that came later. She's now hoping to go to Cambridge. So you don't know what that potential is, and you, as the state, cannot personalize things to come up with facilitating a child reaching their potential in a way that a parent can. And that is part of being your child's champion. Okay, so is the parent a champion? Well, obviously, I would say that the parent is a champion, because that's your job, isn't it? It's your job is to ensure that that child comes through as healthy as possible, both body, mind, and spirit, and to ensure they get an education. And if you're a home educator, of course, you're championing them in more aspects of life than you might otherwise. Some parents don't manage to be champions, and there are both preventative factors, and there are also barriers to a parent being a champion. And I would categorise them separately. So we'll get into that in a minute. But where does the drive to champion your child come from? Where do you think it comes from? Do you think it's, I don't know, is it learned behaviour? Or I think, I like that, Monica. You were both wrong. Quite. One of the joys of parenting. You never know what's around the corner. Okay, so I would say that the drive to champion your child is actually innate. It's biological and it's instinctive. And that comes out, the mama bear thing is where we start with it, that kind of thing. And that comes out so long as all goes well, or most things go well. So there are things that can negatively influence the ability to champion your child. See if anybody can anybody think of any reasons? Go on. I'm going to throw it out open to the floor at this point, see whether anybody comes up with anything.
Parents are talked down and told they can't do it.
There is that. Yeah, definitely. Juliet.
I was going to say if a parent has mental health issues themselves.
Absolutely. I think as well, they can be easily undermined by others who the parent sees as authority figures. So a bit like building on what Randall said, but people generally saying, like, think about Super Nanny. Super Nanny has a very as Harriet was saying yesterday, Super Nanny has this very formulaic approach to toddlers. You will do this, depending on how old they are. They spend so many minutes on the naughty step, blah 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 blah, and it doesn't really work, does it? But you can be influenced by that, because there's this person who's looked after hundreds of children. And you think, well, she's looked after hundreds of children, she must know what she's doing. And if you were a first-time parent, you were very nervous, you didn't have any decent support network or anywhere to model your parenting on, you might fall into the trap of reading Gina Ford. Everybody have a laugh. Reading Gina Ford or following Super Nanny or any of those things. And you might end up doing the things that they do just because you don't trust your innate ability and your instincts. And generally, parents' instincts are pretty darn good. If parental instincts weren't good, none of us would have survived. Evolution wouldn't have happened. The human race would have died out. So, we must be doing something right for thousands and thousands of years. Another thing, pushing too much in unhelpful ways. Yeah, absolutely. Having the wrong expectations of the child. Fantastic. Yes. And also past life experiences. So if you've experienced trauma, or if you've not had a great childhood, your parents weren't good models for you, that can go either way, of course. If they were terrible parents, you can go, well, I'm going to be a fantastic parent, and then you go out and do a lot better. Or you can say, well, I don't know where I'm going. I've got a client at the moment who had a dreadful parent, and she's absolutely at sea at how to parent. She's got not a clue. We're having to start from scratch. And her 11-year-old has actually left home to go and live with somebody else because she's so distressed about the way her mother parents. And it just becomes a generational stunting of the ability of emotional health and all the rest of it, and the ability to parent. We see a lot of these generational things. Poor self-esteem, childhood trauma, absolutely. Bad parenting models, yeah, absolutely, 100%. So as well as these things which undermine this innate and natural parenting stuff, there are also barriers that are put in place. So you might have those instincts, and those instincts might be very bad, very good, but you end up with coming across barriers. Now, to my mind, all of those barriers to championing your child relate to the distrust of parents. This distrust of parents that both Randall and Harriet have spoken about, and we who talk quite a lot with Juliet and everybody else, this complete distrust of parents, which has come about and is much more severe since 1997, etc. I think it probably started with the No Child Left Behind USA drive. I don't know whether anybody remembers that. I think it was 1990. And then that morphed into Every Child Matters in the UK. And there is this drive where the state seems to be stepping in a lot more into the space which should be occupied by the parent. Okay, so I was thinking about where these barriers are coming from, what underlies these barriers, and I was thinking about how we look at parenting these days. So there's this belief. So one of the things is we're redefining the role and the look of parenting in this era. It's not necessarily redefined by people like us, but it's redefined by the state, and it's redefined by popular culture. So parenting has become a series of events and actions rather than a relationship. And this is where it seems to have gone horribly wrong, because parenting is a relationship. Harriet said yesterday that parent is a verb, not a thing. And this is much along the same lines, that parenting is about a relationship. It's not about just the things that you do. Oh, you do the potty training, you do this, you do that, you do. It's the glue that joins all that stuff together. It's the fuzzy stuff, the grey areas, the bits in between. And I was thinking about this earlier today, and one of the things I was thinking about was we have this perception, this phrase that comes up all the time: quality time. Are you spending quality time with your child? And as a home educator, when I was a home educator, I absolutely detested that phrase, because to me, that phrase epitomizes the drive to send all parents into work and children into childcare, and to make those parents feel less guilty about giving over the upbringing of their children to other people, by telling them it's okay, so long as the time you spend with them is quality time, it'll be fine. And I don't know whether any of you agree with me, but when you become a home educator, when you become a full-time parent, right at the beginning, and then you continue that full-time parenting as a home educator, you realise that all time with your child is important. There isn't such a thing as quality time with the child. There's just family time. And family time is really important. And we're back to the family time being that really important time, that time where you're building that relationship. And as part of that relationship, you get to know your child better than anybody else in the world. And that facilitates your championing of that child. And I think all this drive to go to work, and I used to be on the board of something called Full Time Mothers, which is called something else now. I can't remember. Mothers Matter, I think it's called now, as an organisation. And these are the kind of conversations we used to have all the time about this social and political drive to get both parents out of the home and into work, and to have other people. Exactly. Government has Mothers at Home Matter. That's them. Thanks, Juliet. This drive to get all the children as early as possible into nursery. I don't know whether anybody's had a child recently, but there's a lot of pressure now from health visitors to put your child in nursery at 3, because otherwise they'll never learn how to socialise. My kids learned how to socialise fine with that. So the other thing, another underlier to these barriers is the position of the state as a parent. So the state is inserting itself more and more and more. It's edging its way into parenting. So, for example, Juliet was mentioning to me the other day about things like in education, not being. There are things that are taught in education that you might think actually were more parenting issues. So more and more and more. So there's a drive. So all this stuff about, oh, kids these days don't know how to cook. We should teach them to cook in school. Well, why isn't that happening at home? You know, that happens in my home. I don't need my kid to go to school to learn how to cook. Then there is the religious and belief aspect of it, you know, things that might, or family values aspect of it. If what's taught at school conflicts with your family values, and these things that are taught in these PHSE lessons aren't necessarily taught as information. If they were taught as information, we probably wouldn't have as much of a problem with it. But they are presented as indoctrination. And if you don't follow the thought pattern that you are told to follow, if you don't go along with what you're being told, you suddenly become just a pariah of some kind. You're wrong. You're not formed right. One of the big debates at the moment, of course, is around things like transsexuality, transgender, and things like that. And there's a lot of talk about it. And so my daughter comes home with saying all sorts of things that I don't even understand, to be quite honest. Words that I don't even understand, and I don't really want to get into because I'll just put my foot in it. I'm quite sure there's an awful lot of politically correct language going around, and I think just by avoiding all of it, I don't get into trouble. But it's things like that. It's things like that, and then again, the state stepping in as the parent is the medical aspect. So not involving the parents in medical decisions about children when, you know, you might consider that that's not appropriate in your particular child. And back to what Harriet was saying yesterday about separating the child from the parent, not seeing the family as a unit anymore, but seeing as them all as individuals. Randall, you said, I don't know whether it was yesterday, you said about that thing at the DFE. Say that thing at the DFE again about the parent isn't, the child's an individual. You're on mute.
Unmute. Yeah, this isn't a recorded fact. It's somebody I know was at the meeting, and one of the people there said to the DFE in this meeting, you must remember that children belong to their parents, belong in families. And one of the DFE reps said, no, they don't. They are independent, right-bearing citizens, and it is our job to protect them. And yeah. I was just going to type into the chat a court judgment where a young girl took, I think it was somebody like the Tavistock Centre to court. The court ruled in her favour, but actually ruled against the NHS, not because it was the parents they should have consulted, but it was because the court had final say in the child's life. So even that was a step in the right direction, but it was still a disfranchising or de-enfranchising of parents.
Isn't there a case that's just happened in Canada? And I'm not talking about the rights or wrongs of the fact that this was a transgender case, just about the fact that this was a parent who refused to refer to their child as the sex or whatever
of their choice.
Yes, exactly, of their choice, and has actually been jailed for doing so.
Yep, I've heard that on the wires as well.
And that is the ultimate in undermining. I mean, this is a child. This is a minor. This isn't This isn't an adult. This isn't. Yeah, it's yeah. So there we go. So this undermining of the parents' position, the separation, also the state seeing the child as an asset. We heard earlier from South Africa that it's actually mentioned in legislation and guidance that the children are assets of the state, which is quite a frightening prospect, I think. Very, very frightening. Do you have any comment on that, Juliet?
I'd like the state to be the ones who go through the labor and all the sleepless nights and the temperatures, and yeah, let the state do that too. Then I think most mothers, just from that point of view alone, you take huge umbrage at anyone wanting to kind of, okay, we'll take over now. You know, we can do a better job than you.
Yeah, right. Okay. And then, of course, the other thing that underlies these barriers is the implication that parents are suspicious or dangerous, and we see this rhetoric again and again and again. And it you know, the idea that people have to be kept an eye on, goes back to those home-educated children who are allegedly not seen by a professional, because, you know, after all, it's never the professionals that abuse them, is it? So there we go. So, championing your child, what do you think the effects are in the later life of the child? What positive effects does championing your child have? Oh, school opinion must be the right one. Yes, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, Katie, this is very, very true, all of that. Yeah. Starts happening at school, gets left to school and assumed it's happened. It's not happening. Yep. And the school opinion, that's the right one. Yep. RSE education, where parents don't have the ability to remove their children where they would like to. Yeah. Yeah, and the thing about the RSE education, Ruth, is really, for me, if it was just information, I wouldn't have a problem, but it's indoctrination. And there isn't really a particularly fine line between the two. I think there's a very broad line between the two. And I think it's willfully crossed over time and time again with these things. Okay, so the effects in the later life of the child of championing your child. Has anybody got any suggestions? I've got a huge list, actually. I won't go through them all, but one of the things I thought was caring. If you champion your child learns to care and becomes a carer in later life, because they understand about looking after somebody else and thinking about somebody else's interests other than their own. Another one I came up with was self-esteem and confidence, because by being championed, you are, learn to see the potential in others. I like that one. Really like that one. Yeah. Mental health and resilience. That's another one. My son came up with one when we were going over this earlier, and he said self-motivation. So by being championed, so there's something that just happened, inner security. Yeah, absolutely. I put healthy family values and relationships as well. Oh yeah, I like that one, Katie. Less likely to be swayed by others' opinions if they're used to having their own respected. Absolutely. Just nicer people, really, generally speaking. I think that's ooh, heck.
What's wrong?
Sorry, my headphones for some reason disconnected themselves for a moment there. I have no idea why. Okay, so healthy family values and relationships I've got. Right, okay, Monica says she didn't sleep train.
So when she didn't do that training where they had to cry themselves to sleep and all of that. She went and got up and looked after them.
Exactly. Yeah. So that is this the Monica O'Connor? I think it is. Oh, I have to see if it is. Stuff like saying you will collect your. Oh. Awesome! Nice to meet you for the first time ever, after knowing you for about 15 years online. Right. Oh my goodness me! COVID's done some wonderful things, hasn't it? Right, okay, so stuff like saying you'll collect your older children or pay for a taxi at any time of night without being cross helps older teens. Absolutely, yeah, I like that one, Anne. I think that's really interesting. Bold and able to hold their own opinions and beliefs. Yep, definitely. Another one I put was finding a tribe. I know that word tribe is sometimes a bit controversial, but I don't mean it in any kind of controversial way. I mean in the way that that you develop your own extended family, don't you, as you grow and you learn. My daughter has a little tribe at school. She asked me what I meant by that when I was going through this with her earlier, and I said, well, you've got your 7 friends that you have at school, and you do lots of things together. You do things at night, you support each other. You have a WhatsApp group together. You go to the cinema together. You support each other. When one of you's down, the others going. That's the tribe thing, and that ability to gather a tribe around you means that you are more resilient going forward. You have places to go later on. Your health is going to be better, both mental and physical, and you're going to be supported in your parenting as you grow and become a parent yourself. Being there for the long haul versus forever changing faces found in institutions. I like that one, Mark. Really good. About Gary Fowler builds your sense of who you are yourself. Yep, absolutely, 100%. And the last one I put on here was you would learn to better recognize good people. So a lot of people who suffer from poor mental health or have disastrous, chaotic lives are very poor at selecting their friends. Probably noticed they're very poor judges of character because they don't recognise a good character, and that can be so. There's massive impact from championing your child, and so there must be massive impact from removing the ability of somebody to champion their child. Okay. We're at past. Gosh, I'm nearly finished, actually. So, championing your child. What needs to change? So, what do you think? What do you think might be a good thing to change moving forward?
Is that for parents or for
for the state, if you will? What does the state need to do to make sure that championing your child? I mean, first of all, it has to recognise that championing your child is a good thing, obviously.
Yeah.
But moving past that obvious thing, one of the things I put down here was that attachment parenting should be accepted as the normal model.
Yeah.
We're still harking back to Victorian days with naughty steps and all of that bullshit. Excuse my French. It's abysmal.
I think the thing that I also feel is that if they start giving parents back responsibility and rather supporting families or parents as they try and learn how to parent and giving them that support when it's asked for and wanted, that we will see parents take that up. You look at home educators who start out and haven't got a clue, and we sort of see their comments come through and we think, oh my goodness, this person's actually going to home educate, whatever. And we see them actually grow and develop as people, as parents. We see them go through such a huge change as parents, which is an amazing change.
Yes, absolutely. It's very empowering. It's a very empowering process, is it not? One of the things I did put about that intervention, I said that intervention should not be universal. It does appear to be universal at the moment. We all get dictated to, don't we? That you ought to parent like this. No. If my kid's fine, leave me alone. So the intervention should be targeted. It should be where needed, and I mean targeted in a true way, not in the way that they think they're targeting it right now. And that when that intervention comes, it should be supportive and empowering to parents, not condemning and punitive. I go to a number of child protection conferences, and I feel like I need a shower straight afterwards. They are the most horrible experience. I would almost prefer going to the dentist, and I have dental phobia. So you know, I mean, they are horrific parent bashing competitions. You'll have 15 professionals sat round a table, and every single one of them will have something bad to say about the parent, and they'll be trying to outdo each other with the bad thing they say about the parent, and it's not helpful. There's nothing facilitative about the child protection system that we have at the moment. Nothing facilitative about it. It is all about parent bashing. And social workers will come in and they will say, "You're doing it wrong. Do it right," and then walk away. That's effectively what they do the whole time. They don't say, "How about if you," or, you know, they don't assign a mentor to that family. They don't. There's none of that. It's just, "You're doing it wrong. All that washing, that washing shouldn't be there. You've got piles and piles and piles of washing. It shouldn't be there." Nobody says to them, "Why don't you build in a routine that fits in, that blah blah blah, do it like this." There's no practical help. There's no help whatsoever. And then they send everybody on the Triple P parenting course, regardless of whether their child is autistic or not. And it really doesn't suit autistic children, I can tell you that right now. It just, yeah, one size fits all. Horribleness, absolute horribleness. Let's have a look, see if there's anything else. Anne came up with something earlier. Hang on. Oh gosh, there's loads. Okay, so the parents need to trust themselves and assert the boundary. State officials also need a more supportive culture at work. Disconnected again. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, right, okay. State officials also need a more supportive culture at work. They don't want to be the one who made the wrong decision. That's true. They're all terrified. Laws that support families and mums at home, recognising the value and role of mothers. Too true, Ruth. There needs to be clarification on best interests of a child and some recognition of the variables and define that. Yeah, I think we just have to trust parents to be there in the best interests of their children, unless there's something going obviously wrong. At the same time, by the way, I think we also ought to have officials reacting when they get reports. That I've reported 3 families to social services over lockdown who I was desperately worried about, and not a single one of them has had any social services intervention whatsoever, and they are all getting worse. Also, remember the layer of community between family and state. It's missing in all the conversations. Yeah. Well, that's what I was saying about the tribe. So you develop your tribe, and they're your community around you. Absolutely, 100%. Yeah, several layers. Stop a culture of blame for state employees. Absolutely. Incentivize a parent being able to stay at home with young children. Incentivize. Oh, Monica, that's fighting talk, that is. So much is driven by a fear of being wrong rather than a desire to do what's right. With parenting as well as with being a social worker, everywhere, everybody's just terrified of being wrong. Get rid of the checklist. Childcare is not a formula. Checklists and everything. Checklists in child protection. I mean, Harriet was saying yesterday about this this category of emotional abuse, and one of my cases, I've got a case that I'm dealing with in the Midlands at the moment, which is a woman, a mother of 3 children, whose husband has a non-molestation order against him because he is a vile human being and has caused untold stress to the family. And he disappeared for 3 years and then just came back, you know, but you know, anyway. This case is a case of accused fabricated or induced illness. It is my 15th case of FII in 10 years in home educating families, and every single one of the 14 cases before this all turned out to be autism combined with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. Every single one. And the parent has been championing her children, saying, "Please, can I get tests for autism and EDS?" She herself has EDS. And they're basically saying no, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And I can guarantee that in the end, that's what it will be. but we might end up in court before that. The trauma to the children will be horrendous, and all because they don't trust the parent. And this FII accusation is one of those ticks on a checklist. The social services have a list in their guidance of things that it could be. You know, something's going wrong. See if it's this. Oh, FII, that's convenient. Right, I'll go for that one. And an FII case, if it turns out to be true, is a career maker for a social worker. So not very nice. Not very nice at all. The last one I've got on here. Oh no, two things. Parenting and relationships should be respected as individual and unique. No one size fits all. And the privacy of the family should be respected. We should look at human rights legislation and agreements about that. Let's have a look. Get rid of the checklist. Zero recognition that involvement from the authorities is traumatic. Absolute. First, do no harm. Yep. My favourite word in meetings is iatrogenic. Iatrogenic is actually only used in medical terms normally, but I'm leading the campaign to bring it out of the medical sphere. And iatrogenic is the doing harm when you're trying to do good thing. And social services intervention is almost always has iatrogenic effects. Almost always. So I'm done, folks. That wasn't too bad. That was 40 minutes, Juliet. That was okay.
Great. That's great. And
I can't hear you
too. Oh, sorry. Oh, I have got.
Can anybody else hear her?
I'm unmuted, so hopefully everyone can hear me. Yes.
Yeah.
It's Alison's earphones.
I can hear.
Okay. She needs to check her earphones. Yeah. So I'm wondering if I should stop the screen share while Alison sorts herself out there. Bear with. Can you hear me now, Alison? Anything? Gotta love Zoom, you know. There's so many memes about it. It's hilarious.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
We can hear you.
I can't hear you. Hang on.
Can't hear any of us.
Oh, just a sec.
Okay. Sometimes
Hey!
there you go. Okay. Sometimes you do, like I've found out my microphone wasn't plugged in, and then shall we stop the screen share, Alison, and open up the panel?
Apologies. Yep.
That's okay. You couldn't hear me, so.
You were just talking about me while I was not there.
Absolutely. I had a lot to say too. Okay, so we're going to put Randall up here with you. And where is Harriet? There you are. I'll bring Harriet. Okay, and so, we want to have a little bit of discussion on some of this. And, and where does it bring us, in terms of the political situation? What options are there for us as parents to try and change this or, reshape the narrative, reframe the narrative?
It's very difficult, isn't it? As Harriet was saying yesterday, they're not interested in evidence. They don't care about evidence. You could throw as much evidence as you liked at them and say, this is having a bad effect, that's having a bad effect, that you're worried about something that doesn't exist. And they just don't care, do they, Harriet?
No. And I've just posted up on my speakers thing yesterday, a paper which is called, hold on a second, it's called A Policy Driven by Prejudice Masquerading as Research. It's not to do with home education, it's to do with the Allen report, the brain on the front of the report, and it's Dr. Ellie Lee writing about that. And I think for me, it's back to that point of, this is not something that is happening to home education, this is something that is happening to society. And I think we've got to argue it on those terms. I think we've really got to argue it. This is not just our little corner, our little niche. This is what's happening across the board. I mean, Randall's just sent me 2 scary articles about daycare in Sweden. If your child is not in daycare by the time they're 1 year old in Sweden, you're flagged up with social services That's a red flag. You know, why is your child not in daycare?
Sweden's dreadful for Sweden. Everybody thinks that the Swedish live this wonderful life, and they bloody well don't. I can tell you, we have relatives in Sweden. You go get reported to social services for virtually anything. It's one of the most conformist countries in the world, and you put one toenail over that line of conformity, and you are in deep trouble.
Yeah.
I want to, I saw a video today, which I watched some of. It was a, I'm not sure how this woman got this letter, but whether she's a teacher or not, but she had this letter. This is in Scotland, and it's obviously recent, where the schools have been told that if parents appear to kind of be a little different and saying something different what the government is saying. So take, for instance, I'm assuming with things like maybe even with coronavirus, if the parents have differing views to the government narrative, basically they are to be reported. And this is seen as being a safeguarding risk to the children because the parents are passing these views on to the children. So you know, what some would basically, it's like a gaslighting as well. You're calling people conspiracy theorists because they have a different opinion, because they don't agree, and they expressing different thoughts on to what the government is saying. So I see Katie has her hand up. Sure. You want Katie to?
I was thinking that point there. It's what you see on the thing about social media, where everyone is just policing everybody else's opinions now, and there's just no toleration of different ideas and different perspectives. There's just sort of a society-wide move towards
very scary.
Someone defines the only allowed opinion, and everyone has to conform to that, and there's no space for even discussing it that's allowed.
That's what I was saying about the indoctrination in the PHSE curriculum. That's my husband disappearing. The indoctrination in the PHSE stuff. You have to be indoctrinated in this way, and if you then don't spout those things and you say something else that might have been said at home, then you have been dangerously radicalized by your parent or something like that.
Yeah, can I jump in? I've just put two things. I've just put the two links I sent to Harriet into the chat. The real thing is the author is actually saying the real terrible thing about this is teenagers who've been in daycare from an early age are having a greater percent of mental health issues, and the government will not address the issue that is coming from daycare.
But I mean, it's, you know, that's a no-brainer. If you grow up in an institution, of course you're going to have more personal issues. Of course you're going to have poorer mental health. And it just, you know, it occurred to me, listening to Alison tonight, you know, for 3 nights now, we've been talking about this relationship between children, parents and the state. None of us have yet said the word love. You know, that's what parents do for their children.
Yeah.
And that cannot be replicated on some kind of checklist by some professional. I know it cannot be replaced by super nanny, by a child rearing manual, by any measure of professional advice. There is no substitute for a parent loving their child.
I think you touched on it last night though, Harriet, in this idea that you said that parenting is now not who you are, but it's this set of actions.
Yeah.
And we've reduced parenting to be mechanical.
Yeah.
And that takes out all empathy.
And once it's mechanical, once you've reduced it to that checklist of tasks, anybody can do those tasks. So,
I said it's become a series of tasks and events as parenting, tasks and events, and it's no longer referred to as a relationship. They no longer talk about the relationship aspect of it, which includes the love and the care and all the rest of it. All that soft, squidgy stuff that is the stuff that's the most important is just avoided.
Yep.
Iona's got her hand up. I don't know if she wants to come in.
To be honest, I was surprised myself that I managed to get my hand up, but I don't know how to cancel it. Anyway, I'm glad to speak. as ever. Yeah, there's some horrific cases that have come to the public eye of Romanian people in Norway and other Scandi countries who have had dreadful problems because they're evangelicals and because they might have smacked their kid, oh dear. And I wonder how anybody who advocates for protecting these children so much from their families has so much trust that anybody else will do a perfect job. Because obviously, yes, there are cases where you remove the child because the parent is not as good as this foster carer is. But actually, what are the chances that you're messing the child even more? And of course, it came out of the woodwork that the head of Barnevernet had to go to court over a child's inappropriate material on their computer. So, and that was the head of the... I wonder, where is the basis for trusting anybody else anymore? Yes, parents are imperfect. How is anybody else any better? I don't know.
Well, it's not only that. It's well documented that the state makes an abysmal parent, isn't it, Randall?
Don't get me going there. Don't get me going there. But actually, on that, I'll mention Mary is in our family. Mary's the reader. I'm the film watcher, and Mary joined the book club a while back. It hasn't met for a while, but we know why. And one of the novels they got to read, and she'll either tell me or you may know it anyway, was about some murders in Russia during the Stalin period. And the mentality in Russia was it was a serial killer, but nobody would investigate these murders. Why? Because the Stalinist system was right, and therefore there could be no crime.
Of course.
And I actually feel that is where we're at in this country and many other countries when it comes to looking after children. If a child is in school, the mantra is that child is safe. No matter how they get abused, they are safe. But the moment they're not in school, they're not safe. Now, going back though, I'm glad we're talking about this as a deeper level than just home education, because actually it isn't just home education. I see us as the last wall of resistance, and we are now the only focus. Everybody else has succumbed. There's a few people now in schools, particularly over the RSE, who are kicking back. But why do they want home education squashed as well? Well, then nobody will have anywhere to run. And the children will become children of the state. I don't know whether any of you have seen a video from the States, short minute and a half, by Professor Melissa Harris-Perry from April 2013. I could show it, but let me read what she says in it. She was a TV presenter and a professor. She says, "We have never invested as much in public education as we should have, because we've always had a kind of private notion of children. Your kid is yours and totally your responsibility. We haven't had a collective notion of these are our children." So part of it is we have to break that kind of private idea that kids belongs to parents or kids belong to their families, and recognize that kids belong to whole communities. Once it's everybody's responsibility and not just the households, then we start making better investments. So kids do not belong to the family. They're a commercial investment for the state. And parents work against that. You think about what's happened in China. I don't know how many of you know what's happening with the Uyghur Muslims there. The BBC actually covered it. the Chinese government want to stamp out the Muslim population in the west of China. They're imprisoning people, but the BBC, there's a couple of articles on there where they've now started taking children off their parents and putting them into state nurseries where they spend all their life, giving them Han Chinese names and things like that. And it is just to make them into the people they want them to be. And the thing is, I'm surprised the BBC's covered it, because on the whole, the media's been quiet about that. And I suspect that's what we're facing around the world. Yeah, it happened in America, but has anybody seen the film Rabbit Proof Fence from a way back? Watch it. There was something in Al Jazeera about a month ago about the same thing happening in Canada, taking off Indian children off their parents and putting them in boarding school to culture them. And that is what's happening. And they want that there is a move to say we want a monoculture around the world. And anybody who says, I don't want my children to fit in that culture, is going to be a target. But my only hope, I think I might have mentioned it last night, my only hope is that not just home educators, but other parents will wake up. Other parents will wake up and say, we're not going there. So, sorry, that was a bit long and there's loads of chats come in, but I just had to say that, you know, this argument's a deep one and it's an important one. Harriet, are you waving your pencil?
Well, I can do. Little pencil waver. I think two things that I would want to add to that. I think what we're seeing is a massive instrumentalization of childhood, and a real focus. And I talked last night about the state's vested interest in children. We can't undo that. And I think we probably don't want to undo it, but nor do we want to push it to the kind of extremes that you're talking about. And we have become very poor at valuing children for what they are in the moment, for the here and now, and very invested in what they're going to be in the future. And like Alison's first quote from Rita Pearson, the best that they can possibly be, it's not what you are today that matters, it's what you're going to be in 5 years' time or 10 years' time, or when you're a grown up. And I have huge issues with this phrase about children meeting their potential. I find that very sinister, but it's all that kind of forward, future-oriented focus. The other thing that I wanted to say about all this is, you know, that I tried to draw out last night as well, this idea of belonging and who do children belong to, and the kind of children's rights rhetoric and going down that route. So I can see Anne's put in the chat, children belong to themselves. And I understand where that is coming from. But at the same time, you know, it kind of throws you back to Margaret Thatcher saying there's no such thing as society. There's just collections of individuals. I don't want to be an individual without a society. I don't want to be an individual without a family. I don't want to be an individual with no personal responsibilities to anybody else so that I'm free to fulfill my potential. You know, I want to be networked into a community, into a family. I want to look after my children, look after my husband, my parents. You know, I want to be, and that kind of idea that children somehow need to stand alone, and anything that might be seen as getting in the way of their education or their potential or being the best that they can possibly be needs to be stripped away.
There's also this idea that institutions listen to children more than parents do, and we know that that's absolute nonsense, because I mean, look at what the Welsh Children's Commissioner, she did that survey of the children and the children said the wrong thing, so she said that they hadn't got it right. You know, I mean, we pay lip service to listening to children, and when the children say the thing that we want them to, not we, the institutions, the powers that be, when the children say the things that they want, those things get enacted, even if they're crazy. And the parents are going, whoa, 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 hang on a minute, don't do that because blah, 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 blah. And we're all told that we're just holding our children back. I mean, this idea of potential, I agree with you, Harriet. It really, really upsets me, this idea of fulfilling potential, because what does it mean? For me, if I'm going to be a successful parent, my indicator of being a successful parent is that I have a child who is content and healthy as an adult. That's it. That is the sum of it. Content and healthy, and all the things that make them content and healthy, of course, go along with that. But content and healthy, and notice I don't say happy, because that is another one that I can't stand. Is where we're all supposed to be happy. Nobody's happy all the time. We're supposed to be content most of the time. Sometimes really happy, sometimes a bit sad, but content. You know, and the idea that we should all go around with toothy grins on our faces like the Americans in cheesy movies do is utterly ridiculous. So yeah, content and happy is where I go. Oh, and by the way, I don't yet know what I want to be when I grow up. I think it might be an art director.
I hope you don't mind me adding myself here, because I wanted to just add on what you were saying, Alison, and saying if as a parent, your child said something and you said to your child, no, you didn't, you meant that, then that gets regarded as a whole different, then that's problematic. It's just very interesting how it's a one-sided argument. And the thing about fulfilling your potential, that whole, I think as a parent, how you want your children to fulfill the potential is very different from a teacher or for the state wanting to, because their idea of what that child's potential is it's biased. It is going to be biased. I think, like, I remember using that term myself when I removed my daughter from school, and that was because I could see how school was going to limit her because of the damage that was happening, and she would never have a chance of being the person she could be as long as she continued in that environment. But I think it depends who's saying it, because a lot of these things, when the state is saying it, they actually don't mean it. They really don't mean it, because they have no idea of what a child's potential is.
I think the thing that hit me about that quote was the word insist.
Yeah, I think it's well
Right.
meant. It's well meant, but it's patronizing.
Well, I think every parent's role can be to encourage their children to become, so they get, and I'll pick up Alison's word, content with life. They feel they are not wasting their life.
Yeah.
And that is fine. You've got there to set them the example and to encourage them to do what they feel. But the way people get there is very different.
Yeah.
And it is this, but this is all thing to make people buy into a system and drive into it, so that, you know, one of the things Gatto points out is actually the school system has actually done away with initiative, commercial, independent, self-employed people doing initiative to provide for their families and earn a living and do all that. And one of the things, you know, his argument is that it's to squeeze people into the mold to be the economic unit that the elite want. And if that is what's behind this, well, then that isn't wanting a child to reach their full potential, because a child who reaches their full potential might be a great actual challenger of the system.
Yeah, exactly. That's scary to the state.
Yeah.
The truth is that, and so when they say they want a child to reach their full potential, they should be a little afraid of saying that, I guess.
Yeah. Well,
yeah, they're always going to fail. The state's always going to fail to do that. They're always going to fail to provide a properly individualised education. They're always going to fail to do anything on an individual basis, because it's just not possible. You can't make a machine do something that a person can do.
Yeah,
Mm.
I think we've got a big battle ahead of us. I'll say that much. I think because to get anywhere with, it's all very well us sort of having these conversations and we see it and we get it, but we need to find ways to kind of convey that to those around us, because I know there are other parents who are just as frustrated, who've got children in school with special educational needs, who are going to tribunals, who are, just so many situations where parents' needs are being just overridden and being steamrolled and patronized, talked down to family need, where a child needs something and the parent, like the fictitious illness thing, where the parent isn't listened to. And that's something we're really going to need to look at, is how do we actually do something with all of this? Because we can talk about it, but we'll have to think about that very long and hard. I see Joanna has got her hand up again. Can I just pop you in here?
Yeah, I noticed that one comment by Anne didn't get commented on, about the culture that's cultivated, possibly being different between China and Russia and America and maybe Britain. And actually, I wonder if this would help us, because as we heard last night, this document about the children's rights is so interpretable. It's internationally signed, and yet in each of these countries, the best interest of the child means something diametrically opposed to in the next country. But because we're so good at sussing out how bad communist regimes deal with their children, can't we see how colonizing we are in our own culture? You see, we're so good now at seeing the oppression to, the minority cultures, I don't know, in Native American, Australian, Aborigines. And how can't we see that we're doing the same? Universalize. So yeah, it's probably not global, but on national level, and possibly there's a certain Western, maybe American, British, quite similar, Scandinavian, they're already in the world of their own. But I wonder whether this tool of analyzing the differences and seeing the faults of the, communist can help us undo our own blind. Don't know.
I was going to write that if we showed that film, The Rabbit-Proof Fence, to some of these people we're talking about, these status types, would they get it? Would they be shocked, or would they see the parallels?
I don't think they would, and I don't think they face up to what's happening in what happened in Canada. I don't think they'd face up. Joe Merritt mentioned School in the World documentary, 10 years old now. That's the most recent event really need thinking about. But just going back to the question of, would America, Russia, China all agree? Who would have said that 18 months ago face masks would become the most common fashion item globally? They are now. Have any of you heard of the World Economic Forum? Charles Schwab is the head of it. He's written a book, I think it's in the Fourth Industrial Revolution, his book. And he is talking there about a new economy, which is a blend of a global economy, a blend of capitalism and communism. And so we may not be as far away from people thinking they can achieve. Remember, I pointed out on Monday night, I ended with Julian Huxley's point that there is a desire to build a single world culture. We're much nearer now than we were 50 years ago. Now you can get something trending on social media and everybody agrees with it, or 90% of the world agrees with it within 20 minutes. And that is just happening. And people don't sit down and think anymore and think, well, is this right? Why? because most of them have been trained to listen to what the teacher says, the authority says. And home educators are amongst those who teaching children to think for themselves. And I think it was in a different context, Alison, but recently you pointed out that even in home education, the culture of home educators is changing to be much more accepting of what's going on.
Absolutely, it's changing, and it's changing partially because originally when I started home educating after I met John Taylor Gatto in 1999, just a small influence on my life. Big man with a big voice, he really was, and a cat that he took all over the world with him. Very odd. Yes, a cat. He when he used to do talks in Europe. He used to just live in Spain while he did it and fly various places and leave his cat in Spain. Don't ask. I don't know. I just remember that. Anyway, he was a very, very, very interesting man with a very powerful voice, both in writing and physically. But when I started and I met home educators, most home educators were sort of some version of a hippie, really. You know, they were nonconformists. They were free thinkers. They were often extremely highly educated. I have to say, the majority of them were very highly educated themselves. Very intelligent, very poor often. But there was a distinct flavor. Harriet will remember all these people. She was a home educator back then.
One of them. I'm just enjoying hearing about myself.
Exactly.
And intelligent.
Behave. So you know, in those days, that was the majority of home educators were those type of people. And now the majority of home educators are not those who decided right from the beginning, like I did when my child was only 2 years old, that I was going to home educate. They are not those people anymore. The vast majority of those who have not only been let down by the system, either educationally or for special educational needs or through whatever, and their children let down, but have been massively damaged by the system. And they become this, and I'm generalizing here, obviously, so please don't take offense, but they become this cohort of people who are both not wanting to conform because it's caused them damage, but terrified at the same time of not appearing to conform because they think that further damage will be done to them.
Yeah. So there is this cultural shift.
Definitely.
I see a pencil again, Harriet.
The attention of the pencil. I just wanted to come back to Iona before, you know, her comments get buried in as we go further and further into the conversation, because I think, well, I thought what you said was really interesting. There are academic critiques of UNCRC on precisely those grounds, that it's an act of neo-colonization. They don't get a lot of airplay, but it occurs to me as well that it's not just on an international level, it's also on a national level. UNCRC is a very top-down, and as I say, it's not necessarily, I don't think it's necessarily in the spirit of UNCRC, but it seems to me that people don't engage with the whole document and the meaning of the whole document. They go in and find the bits that are going to support the argument that they want to put forward. But I'd also cite as well the Syrian father that I spoke about last night, you know, and being held, you know, sent off to parenting classes because nobody in Syria knows how to parent. You've all been the blind leading the blind for, you know, that never mind that it's a cradle of civilization, you know, you need to come and imbibe our wisdom now, because, you know, Super Nanny style will tell you, you know.
Our culture, not our wisdom.
Yeah, we'll tell you how to do it because you haven't got a clue. It's scary stuff. It has a really...
but the really scary thing about that, Harriet, was his buy-in to it. He totally bought into it.
Yes, It was horrible. It was horrible. And I tell you what made it, you know, and everybody sat there in the auditorium clapping, all these academics who were supposed to engage and think and critique ideas. They all sat there going, isn't this marvelous? And honestly, I felt like, you know, I've either landed on a foreign planet, you know, or I am the alien, because it was just awful. It really was.
Yeah.
I think you're with the other aliens now, Harriet.
Yes, yes.
You're not alone.
Friends of ours was terrific. Well, just flabbergasted. They got some friends who are professionals in whatever sphere, and they had their first child, and it came very early on time to put them in nursery. And they went to the nursery and said, well, you're the professionals, you tell us what to do.
Mm.
And that is
so often. That
that's
happens
the
so
mindset.
often. But yeah, it just happens so often. I'm really privileged actually that I live in a very small town of about 12,000 people called Barnoldswick, which is on the border of North Yorkshire and Lancashire. And when I had my daughter 15 years ago, my son was 8 years old, nearly 9, and he wanted to go to the computer shop. So I used to, on purpose, go sit in this computer shop. They used to have a games console and everything and all that. So he went in there, and I always say that's where he learned to swear. You know, that was part of his education. It's part of his home education. He went to learn to swear with all the teenagers. And I used to sit on the sofa breastfeeding. Fast forward 15 years, those teenagers are now young parents. Guess who they come to for advice, and guess what they do? They home educate and they breastfeed, because I sat in that damn shop home educating and breastfeeding, and they all went, oh, that's quite good actually, and they had that exposure. So I think sometimes a lot of this is about exposing people who may have had a conventional upbringings to the idea that they can question things, and I'm pretty proud of my young mums. They're all fantastic.
Well, that is what happens with home education. People see people who are doing it different.
And you give them permission.
I'll think about that.
Yeah, you give them permission to think differently. I even think back to my own, with you mentioning that, my own sort of hospital experience with my firstborn, as someone with a social work degree, having done all the books, having done all the courses, and yet being reduced to tears by a student nurse telling me what she thought I should be doing, you know, because you're vulnerable. And I think, you know, also just one of the other things is that we learned in psychology about this experiment. I think it might have even been sociology, about these experiments that were done with, I think it was with monkeys or chimpanzees, where they were fed by like an iron mother. Some of you, I see Catherine is nodding, but there was like no love or affection or anything. It was, and you know, that it just how, you know, how they sort of dressed this iron mother up in like toweling or something. I think it's a long time ago since I did it. Maybe Catherine remembers this better than me. Put your hand up if you do. But I remember there was this research that was done, you know, and how these creatures don't survive without that human contact, and even
they preferred the ones. They preferred they spent their time with the cloth mother that didn't have milk. They just took the milk from the metal mother, and then they spent all their time with the unfeeding, soft feeling mother.
Yeah. As I said, it's a long time since it was university days. It's a long time ago. And I know also in one of the orphanages, whether it's in one of the sort of Eastern Bloc countries, where babies were dying just for lack of love and lack of care and lack of, you know, just tenderness. And, you know, the thing is that it's a dangerous path, but I'm not sure our politicians see that. I don't think they see where if they continue along this road, where it's heading.
That psychological experiment, that was Harlow.
Thank you.
In 1965. Yeah, he did a load of stuff on behavioural science and social relationships. Yeah.
Well, thanks for looking that up. So I remembered little bits of it, but not enough to be coherent. Sorry.
No, it's fine.
But I think even that thing of the contact and connection, my daughter also going to a creche because I had to work, and she was at the creche where I worked as a young person, and going to collect her one day and just noticing that she would not make eye contact with the carer, with the person in the room, and finding that really strange. And then sometime after, actually observing through a window, because I worked on the premises, how this woman was treating these 18-month-old children that couldn't speak for themselves, watching how she was treating them. And I managed to get her booted out very, very quickly. But then sort of understanding why, why as a parent, when a child doesn't make eye contact with somebody, there's something wrong. Trust your child. And yet, if we talk about the state being in control, they wouldn't, that's like something a cue they would miss. But
a development of that, Julia, is the idea that we're supposed to. So my children have always been quite Velcro when they're little, which is fine.
Normal.
Exactly biologically normal, I would say. People would say, oh, won't she go to anybody? Can't anybody else hold her? And I went, no, she wants a mum. She didn't even want a dad for the first 3 months. So she wants a mother. That's who she is. And the idea that we're supposed to train our children to trust strangers. Now, I don't get this. I don't get this at all. So we've had this whole campaign of stranger danger about, 20 years ago or something. But at the same time, we're supposed to teach our children to just be handed over from a very young age to these strangers
and they're in charge of you.
And they're in charge of them, okay? And then we wonder why it's easy for a predator to pick a kid like that off the street. Yeah. I wonder why. Oh, this person comes along with an air of authority and tells me what to do. Ought to do it then, oughtn't I? My kids would have gone screaming from the place if anybody tried anything. In fact, they did.
Yeah. And I think it's to get people that are sent, we need to really be looking at how we can gather better evidence. And we've recently had all those cases that hit the news of the sexual abuse in the schools, and then that website that within hours had something like 13,000 reports of sexual abuse in school. So we really need to be collecting all of this evidence as well for our fight back, which I do believe is coming. Okay, I think that it's 8:20, so we probably should let everyone go and enjoy the rest of their evening. I think, we do feel very strongly about this, and it's a very emotive discussion to have. But I do think we need to have our eyes wide open. We need to be aware. We can't assume that this is that it's benign and benevolent, that these agendas are well-meaning. There's a very specific agenda. So yes, and it does cause a lot of damage. We just need to look at the countries where what the product of those approaches has been. And Alison is going to type very hurriedly there to finish it off.
Well, I was just thinking, we were talking about the stranger danger thing, and the flip side of that is there's an awful lot of very lonely old men about these days that, when I was a kid, I used to be allowed to talk to people. I wasn't allowed to go off with them, but talking to somebody is fine. Well, and social skills, please, for goodness sake. Anyway, it's been an absolute pleasure tonight. Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Alison, for your presentation.
It was actually quite hard work putting it together, but very stimulating. So thanks for the challenge.
Yeah, so Lizzie Prentice says, living in Soho, I taught my boys shrewd, not scared. And I do think, parents we can equip our children really well. But we have to, we're also working on our own relationship with our children to have their trust, so that they trust us, because we are ultimately wanting to protect them. That is, I think everything comes from my agenda is to protect, but properly protect, not lip service protect. Okay, thanks everybody.